Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. This edition will be featured on our Hilaal TV YouTube channel. Hamas terrorist sympathizer, jihadist terrorists, calls for deportation and predictions of another 9/11. These are among the torrent of Islamophobic attacks that have erupted across social media and conservative political circles following Zohran Mamdani's success in the Democratic primary for New York City mayor. The 33-year-old state assembly member, a democratic socialist who would become the first Muslim mayor of America's largest city, has been subjected to a barrage of death threats and xenophobic rhetoric from prominent Republican figures and online activists since his primary win became apparent. What would this mean for American politics should Mamdani cause one of the great upsets in history from an American political perspective and also that of New York City? Joining me now from the very same city, I'd like to welcome Suzanne Adely, who is a lawyer, activist, and a member of the US Palestinian Community Network. Suzanne, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Suzanne, these Islamophobic comments, these racist comments, this is expected, isn't it, given who Zohran Mamdani is at this moment?
Absolutely. I mean, it has been expected, and not just from the Republican camps, but also from the established Democratic camps as well. The United States can be a very racist nation, and one of the most acceptable forms of racism is Islamophobia. There is consistently Islamophobic rhetoric that's directed towards Muslim leaders, Muslim countries, Muslim communities, constantly on social media and in the news, that is not challenged in the way that other forms of racism are. And given that the United States and its establishment, which is both Republican and Democrat, has been for most of our lifetimes involved in some kind of direct military or indirect military intervention directed towards Muslim countries around the world, Islamophobia sort of serves the purpose of manufacturing consent for those wars. And so it's something that we've seen for a very long time. Now, in the instance of this particular election, there was a major upset and there was strong opposition to Mamdani's campaign from both Republican and establishment Democratic camps. And a lot of that is stemming from the influence of Zionism in US politics, and particularly in New York City politics. But it's also sort of stemming from just the establishment's opposition to Zohrani's very progressive values, which spoke to sort of the needs of working class New Yorkers.
Suzanne, Zohran Mamdani's got a bit of South African in him. I'm sure you know. Of course, he attended St. George's Grammar School here in Cape Town, of course, born in Uganda to South Asian parents. So just like myself, he's an Indian of Indian descent also at the same time. So it kind of makes it interesting for myself also to view Zohran Mamdani's rise. But this is a man who I think has a lot of principality when it comes to him. The sense that he's willing to go ahead and stick to his principles, and we're going to be just discussing his opposition against Israel in a bit. But the sort of character that Mamdani is, given that I just saw this week, he warmed up to the workers, whether it was especially the blue-collar workers of New York City. It's very rare that you see past New York mayors actually going towards these actual blue-collar workers within New York City.
Absolutely. It is very rare. I mean, I think that, I hear from elders that, some mayors of the past have been more of, let's say, a people's mayors than the ones that have existed in my lifetime. And I know of other cities like Chicago where, there have been mayors of the past who have spoken to working class values. But New York City, the position of the mayor has always been a very elite position, and it has always been connected to elite politics, not just within our state, but nationally. And it's always been, it's understood as being sort of a stepping stone for politicians to also run for the presidency. So as you can imagine what that means. And so Mamdani, his parents are known actually to many of us in New York of my generation. His father is a professor at Columbia, who we look to a lot for his insight about the global South. His mother has made some films who many of us love. He's intelligent. And, in the United States these days, there are a lot of politicians that, kind of like thrive or boast about their lack of education or their intellectualism. Mamdani is also very funny. Something that people really respond to. His videos on social media really, appeal to people. He also, is from, a diverse community in New York City. And he has spent time building a grassroots coalition, and I think he's had more than 40,000 volunteers from around the city. And I think he's probably walked almost every part of the city, meeting and greeting with ordinary New Yorkers, many who are really sort of like suffering from the economic downturn that has the economic challenges that exist including unaffordable housing, low wages, inflation in all aspects of people's lives. And, for a long time, the political party that was supposed to be the political party that spoke to the needs of workers and working class people have really, the Democratic Party, has really lacked in that value, and has been really sort of speaking to the needs of the elite. And to have politicians like Mamdani, finally kind of speaking to the conditions of the working class, who really are the majority, it is something that people really responded to, especially as we see like New York City more and more catering to the needs of the wealthy. And many New Yorkers of all backgrounds are asking, when are our politicians and our leaders going to cater to the needs of working class and just middle class New Yorkers?
Suzanne, there may be a lot of people that love the family of Zohran Mamdani, his family, but I tell you who doesn't. US President Donald Trump. I mean, it's expected, isn't it, that the Republicans are not really going to warm up to Mamdani. The right-wing politicians are not going to warm up to him. Those who, of course, are pro-Zionist are not really going to warm up to him. And this is, of course, the monster that he has to deal with, should, of course, he go ahead and win that mayorship position.
Absolutely. And I think that, we've seen, I think what we've seen happen is that when he started his campaign, the establishment perhaps thought that he wouldn't be able to get very far. And then when they saw that he was gaining some ground through just sort of foundational progressive politics and grassroots organizing, that's when they began to really build a campaign against him, which has been both overtly and and covertly like Islamophobic, racist, and the way that they try to also draw that out was to continue to sort of interrogate him about his views on Palestine and Israel. And, one of the battles that is happening in the United States right now at this time, as we are opposing, in our streets and universities, the genocide happening in Gaza, is this, the way that the idea of anti-Semitism is being weaponized to criminalize our movements. And one of the key accusations being levied against Mamdani is that he's anti-Semitic. And he has worked to really challenge that label by building his own relationship with, the large Jewish community that we have in New York City, many who are actually anti-Zionist. He during the debate, when the mayoral candidates were asked what is the first place that they would go to internationally, every candidate answered that they would go to Israel, except for Mamdani, which is a first, and it is very bold. I'm not saying that Mamdani is perfect on Palestine. I think that, we can start to sort of see signs of him perhaps trying to play at both sides, but he has always been pro-Palestinian and part of and supporter of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. But the reality is that he, if he wants to succeed, he does have to be careful because of the power of Zionism, and the power of Zionism is not just about the Zionist Jewish community. It's also about the Zionist Christian community. It's also about the Zionist tendencies of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And there's an expectation now that, he is now the candidate for the Democratic Party. And the next phase of the election, he's going to be going against the Republican candidate, who looks like he's going to be the former Mayor Adams. And we can expect that these attacks, accusations of anti-Semitism, accusations of sort of being a terrorist sympathizer, and even just accusations of being a socialist, which is still sort of used by many in the United States as being a slur, actually, or being done being said in the context of arguing that you should fear him. All these accusations we can expect are going to be expanded. And I think that we can expect that, the next stage of the campaign, there's going to be sort of even more attacks against Mamdani in the same frameworks.
Yeah, I want to bring the Palestine discussion into this, of course. I just watched the other day an interview he did with Zateo. He did an interview there, and obviously with Mehdi Hassan. And a question I was posed to him, would he bring Benjamin Netanyahu, who currently has this ICC warrant of arrest against him, would he welcome him to New York? And Mamdani said no. Now, this is, of course, going to be a challenge because I think both you and I know the power of the pro-Zionist lobby, especially AIPAC, has. They had supported Kamala Harris, of course, was a Democrat president-elect for last year's U.S. elections. And obviously we saw what happened there. She didn't win it, but of course it went to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump himself has this AIPAC backing to him also. How much of a role is this going to play? The fact that you've mentioned, he's part of supporting BDS. He's a strong advocate for the solidarity of Palestine. As much as in the court of public opinion, he wins it. But of course, in the political arena, it's going to be quite tricky, isn't it?
In the political arena, it will be tricky. Because, as you said, the Zionist lobby is very strong, and the pro-Israeli sentiment among the political establishment is very strong. And that speaks to the US's own interests in the region. But I think that what many of us are saying is that what this primary victory has shown us is that despite what the established politicians themselves are saying, is that voters are no longer sort of listening to the rhetoric of that's coming from the Zionist lobby or coming from the establishment politicians. That voters are saying that, we no longer, believe in this kind of characterization of our politicians based on these labels of, we no longer believe the argument that these politicians need to be feared because they're pro-Palestinian. And I think it shows that also ordinary voters, are after like 20 months of seeing sort of seeing sort of a genocide live streamed on social media, are against the genocide of the people of Gaza. I think for many voters, it also might be that, we need somebody who speaks to our local issues and, and are no longer sort of like, responding to some of the politicians that are saying that, like, you shouldn't vote for this person because of his perspective on Israel. This is, I think, has been the number one takeaway in this election. The belief that, that a politician could not win unless they capitulated, to the Zionists, unless they kept silent about Palestine. The idea that a politician could not win in the United States unless they kept silent on their pro-Palestine position, unless they agreed, with the Zionist rhetoric, is now kind of being proved false. And that should be a message for any progressives who are running for the country, running for office in the U.S. right now. And I think hopefully, that message will be also heard in the next stage of the election, and that voters say that, we're not going to make this election about Palestine and Israel. We're going to make this election about New Yorkers and their own economic, social futures. And also to, we're hoping that the next phase of the election and Mamdani's own time as mayor will also send a very loud message from, not just New York City, but working class communities all over the United States who are saying, we don't want money being spent to slaughter children. We want money spent in our schools. We want money spent for our healthcare. We want affordable housing. This is something that we have an opportunity to really, raise up, not just in New York, but around the country. It's an opportunity. It's a real opportunity.
Suzanne, obviously you talk about opportunity. New York, massive. There's the Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens. I mean, I can go. You've got, of course, the Bronx. It's huge. There's a big, diverse community, whether it's Italian American, African American, South Asian, Arab, Irish. The list goes on. A big working class community that's there in New York City. He's, of course, Mamdani's, of course, overcome the primary. He's now going to take on the Republican representative Mark Cuomo for the mayorship position. I know it's early to tell right now, Suzanne, but does Mamdani have a chance, given how he represents the city, and given that already at this moment he is appealing to especially the working class community of New York City?
I think he certainly has a chance, and I think especially if he and his campaign, his coalition, spend time kind of maybe looking at where there might have been, some gaps in his votes during the primary, right, and trying to look into filling those gaps. So, for example, he has really gained, the support of many immigrant communities, but he actually has not received the majority of votes from the Black community in New York City. He did receive the majority of votes from young Black voters, and he also has not received the majority of votes from Latino community in New York City, and including in the Bronx, which has a large Puerto Rican community, and I think that, that's not surprising. I think politicians like Mamdani, who are running through sort of a social democratic platform, are really not just Mamdani, but others that we've seen in the country in New York. Their support tends to come from younger millennial, and new immigrant communities. So I think that there is some work, to be done in terms of also organizing and meeting with and speaking specifically to the experience of Black communities in the United States who face a different level of economic challenges and segregation than other immigrant communities do. And similarly with the Bronx, which is really the poorest borough in the United States. And I think it can be done, right? Because they have a very strong coalition and it's very grassroots. And as long as they continue to use that coalition in a grassroots way and go out and speak to the people and their needs, but sort of do it, but start to sort of expand in those areas, then I think that like the victory will be easy. However, we do have to contend with the what we're expecting to be increased attacks against Mamdani and his camp, the Islamophobia, the accusations of anti-Semitism, and just the accusations of socialism, which is not a word that's not even used correctly in the United States, honestly. But it's often used as a slur against politicians and organizers. So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, definitely interesting to see how it's going to be. Hopefully we can have you again on our show here, Suzanne Adely. Absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. That's Suzanne Adely, a lawyer, activist, and a member of the US Palestinian Community Network, joining us from New York. Interesting how this is going to turn out. But let me tell you, Zohran Mamdani wins it. It's not just him. It's, of course, Sadiq Khan, who holds the mayorship of another major metropolis in the world, that is, of course, London. Interesting how this will play out. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.